Okay, let's go on. We said we were going to dedicate the next LP News solely to this. I want to put it on the screen a second, but we're going to go back to where the chat window is up, but I wanted to show you this article. Let me find it. Right there. And it actually goes to another page. So the title of the article is Conservatives Are Natural Allies. I haven't read this yet, so I don't know what the verdict is going to be. I'm going to guess the verdict is yes and no. On some things, yes, and on other things, most definitely, nah. Nah, fam. But let's see what the writer has to say. Okay, the writer is Donald Feder, or Feder. I don't know who that is, but it is the Political Perspective column. And I know my heater is probably making noise, but I am freezing. Okay. God, this is such tiny print. Get out my old lady magnifying glass. Alrighty. I think I can, actually with my new contacts, I think I can read it. It's still super, super tiny though. Oh, I guessed wrong. The first sentence is spicy. Libertarians should avoid any sort of alliance with conservatives the way Smokey the Bear avoids taxidermists. Spicy. After years of isolated study groups. Oh, check this out. You can tell this is from the 70s. Check out this next sentence. So after years of isolated study groups, obscure mimeographed publications. Mimeographs. God, I miss mimeographs. They smelled so good. And here's another, he really dated himself. Listen to the next phrase. And proverbial telephone booth conventions. Man, in one sentence, he able to get in mimeographs and telephone booths. Hello, 1970s. Libertarianism is finally achieving movement status. That we offer the only alternative to the stale dogmas of the right and left is increasingly recognized by the news media. Recently, Newsweek featured a full-page article on libertarian politics. I wish they said what issue of Newsweek, because I would pick it up. But without knowing, and I'm laughing so hard, Tyler, I don't know why the super chats aren't appearing. I'm going to put this up because the sticker you use gets described to me. I want you guys to see this, but thank you, Tyler. Look, it says, super sticker, sunglasses perpetually fall onto video game controller's proud face. Oh, that is fantastic, but thank you. Thank you so much, Tyler. Okay. And the New York Times ran no fewer than 5 separate articles on Libertarian Jerry Tuchelli's campaign for the, I know it is like a what the F, perpetually falling on a video game controller's proud face. What does that mean? What does that even mean? I want to see. How does a video game controller have a proud face? With the Libertarian Party now organized in 40 states and the success of publications such as Reason Magazine, our future seems bright. All of this is not lost on conservatives. Of late, check out this writing, they have begun to cast covetous glances, ooh la la, look at you, on our fledgling movement. Conservative politicos fairly salivate at the thought of harnessing the enthusiasm and creativity of libertarians for their own purposes, the reason for which is plain to see. Conservatism is in a terminal state. In 1964, Goldwater conservatism was a glowing, vibrant movement, though obviously holding the allegiance of only a minority of the nation's voters. Today, the cliches of conservatism sound almost inane as the cliches of liberalism. Its leaders have lost their independence, their gadfly position. Goldwater, once the maverick of the Senate, became a docile apologist for Nixonian statism in his later years. Most of the Republican hacks who stuck with Nixon to the bitter end were congressional conservatives such as Brock, Dole, Gurney, Dominic, and Curtis. In 1974, the New York Conservative Party was reduced to supporting Republican Malcolm Wilson for the governorship. This is ironic in that Wilson was the hand-picked candidate of Nelson Rockefeller, the man the Conservative Party was organized to oppose. The fizz has even gone out of that old oxymoron, Billy Buckley. It's natural, therefore, that conservatives should try to latch on to libertarians, and they still are trying to latch on. Dave, what's really interesting, I think it was in past LP news that I did, or no, it was in Radicals for Capitalism. And I might have actually released this to the public, but it might still be on my Patreon, of the chapter by chapter I did through Radicals for Capitalism, where they went through the actual positions of Goldwater. And I know as libertarians today, because of, opposition to the Civil Rights Act, the private sector part of the Civil Rights Act and things like that, we tend to look back on Goldwater as being much more libertarian than his policies actually were. A lot of his other policies are really laid out in Radicals for Capitalism, and he wasn't that libertarian. He was super libertarian on a few very volatile issues, ones that got a lot of press. But the vast majority of his positions were not libertarian. And that surprised me, because I always thought, it's the legend that Goldwater was a proto-libertarian. And I don't think that's true. He's about as libertarian as Ronald Reagan was. So had some libertarian tendencies, but most of the policies not. Okay, continuing. The vehicle they've chosen to lure us into their hoary clutches. The word hoary, and I know some people are getting all triggered. The hoes are going to be mad because they think I'm saying W-H-O-R. No, hoary, H-O-A-R-Y. That's such a great, great word. And you want to hear what the snowflakes are triggered over right now? Because I use the word or phrase attention whore on Twitter, somebody actually accused me of calling someone an actual whore. You do realize attention whore is a figure of speech and has nothing to do with actual sexual services, right? My God, people today. If I've got to explain to you what the phrase attention whore means, you need more help than I can give you. Okay? And listen, and I'll show you right now. I like to say, and listen a lot, don't I? Need to take a drink every time I say so or and listen. I've used the phrase attention whore to myself. I'm quite the little exhibitionist myself sometimes, and I don't mean that in a literal prostitute kind of way. I mean it in just a dramatic, flamboyant, boisterous kind of way. Though, yeah, there's a negative connotation to that, and there's a negative connotation sometimes to all of our behaviors, isn't there? I certainly am not perfect. We've all played the drama queen, and I certainly have as well. Oh no, I said drama queen. What does queen mean there? Am I accusing somebody of thinking they were born into a royal family? Or oh my God, people, my word, I want a new planet. Is an anti-collectivist alliance. The argument set forth in favor of such a coalition is that the differences between libertarians and conservatives are relatively insignificant, particularly when one considers their similarities. Both groups, it is claimed, are anti-big government, pro-free enterprise, and pro-individual freedom. With so few of us and so many of them, liberals, socialists, communists, it makes sense to present a united front. We can always argue out our differences after we save the world from statism. Most libertarians are far too worldly to fall for this come on, but there is a danger that certain neophytes will be seduced. I use the word danger because libertarians have nothing to gain and much to lose by joining a right-wing coalition. Let me enumerate the hazards of a conservative libertarian pact. The much-touted similarities between libertarians and conservatives exist primarily in right-wing mythology. I agree. We are not that similar to conservatives. While the keynote of libertarianism is individualism, conservatives in many ways are as collectivistic as the left. In a recent issue of her letter, Ayn Rand wrote, "In the 1930s, Isabel Patterson, author of The God of the Machine, used to say to me, if you hear some bad collectivist notions, chances are that they come from liberals. But if you hear or read something outrageously, god-awfully collectivistic, you may be sure that the author is a conservative." I mean, like, look at the collectivism of, like, so-called conservatives today. And I shouldn't even say so-called. They're conservatives, like Matt Walsh, who is, like, theocratically authoritarian. With this in mind, consider some of the positions of modern conservatism. Conservatives are fiercely opposed to amnesty. While on the one hand, certain conservatives oppose the draft, except in emergencies, naturally. On the other, they wish to punish those who fled the country to escape the selective slavery system. This is just one example of the inconsistency of conservatives. They will call for free enterprise for business while dreaming up methods to legislatively restrict union activities. They vehemently denounce the brutality of communist regimes while pleading tolerance for the rightist dictatorships of Brazil, Chile, and South Africa. Government regulation of the economy is strictly verboten, but government regulation of the news media, that's another story. Since the conservative ideology isn't based on rational principles, but rather is a potpourri of fear, reaction, and worship of tradition, along with some rudimentarily individualism, conservatives often arrive at contradictory positions. Ooh, that is super spicy, but it is true. Though today it's not conservatives who want to regulate the news media, it's the progressives. But once the conservatives are in power, they will do the same thing, and we know it. Remember, like, the music censorship of Tipper Gore? Well, Tipper Gore, I mean, that's a Democrat as well, so I'm not so sure that was conservative, but it was like the family values thing. Nowhere is the collectivism of conservatives more apparent than in the area of morality legislation. A thunderous Ave. That is interesting. They used a thunderous Ave. I'm assuming that's like from like Ave Maria. Sounded on the right when Nixon's conservative Supreme Court gave its benediction to local censorship. Some conservatives even felt, there's a crease in the page here, that thought control hasn't gone far enough. As I write this article, a story in the New York Daily News relates that Barbara Keating, the Conservative Party candidate for Senate in New York, has pledged to fight for federal laws to curb pornography. Haven't we heard the same thing from Matt Walsh? Bill Buckley rationalizes conservative support for anti-drug laws by calling drug addiction a disease, which, of course, it's the responsibility of the state to quarantine. Libertarian writer David Friedman has countered this with a brilliant essay. I got to get this essay. And the essay's called, "Is Bill Buckley a Contagious Disease?" I got to circle that. I got to see if we can find that. Which points out that the same analogy could be used to ban ideas the state considers infectious. Isn't that what the progressives are doing today? What's it? Stochastic terrorism? This is presently being done in the USSR, where dissidents are often committed to mental institutions. Add to this the conservatives' insistence on government regulation of sexual activity, a willingness to violate the liberties of domestic subversives, denigration of the rights of the accused in the name of law and order, and a gung-ho send in the Marines foreign policy, and you have a rather concise definition of individualism, conservative style. Not that they don't talk a great fight. In 1970, Young Americans for Freedom, as its PR men, America's leading conservative youth group, as its PR men will bashfully admit, produced a little button with the proudly emblazoned slogan, "I am a capitalist." Likewise, a bumper sticker which proclaimed power to the individual. At the very same time, these powerful individualists and self-proclaimed capitalists were pushing an essay by Irving Kristol, which advocated censorship 2 years before the Burger Court. After this brief survey of the rational right, we must make mention of the fact that there are rightists who make Bill Buckley acceptable dinner company for libertarians. Any broad-based coalition on the right will contain a fair number of Wallaceite bigots, liberty-lobberty anti-Semites, Bible-banging bozos, conspiratorialists, peek-under-the-bedders, and assorted yahoos and crazies. And we haven't even begun to discuss the lunatic fringe. If we are to capture the imagination of thinking individuals, libertarians must eschew kookery. If we wanted to be certified as a candidate for the banana boat, I'd at least choose a fun group like the Flat Earth Society or the League to Clothe Animals. Was there a League to Clothe Animals? Oh my God, that's as good as Birds Aren't Real. I need to find that. Let me underline that. If that has gone defunct, we've got to start that again. Someone else want to help start again the League to Clothe Animals if it doesn't presently exist? That is like such a precious troll. I hope that you begin to perceive the vast philosophic and ideological differences between conservatives and libertarians. In many instances, their views are diametrically opposed. Whew! This is good stuff. Since any organization can expound only one set of values at a time, whose views could be projected by this proposed alliance? The answer is obvious when you consider the fact that conservatives, at this point in time at least, are not only numerically superior to us, but have the financial and organizational resources to literally overwhelm us should we join their ranks. Take the situation in Young Americans for Freedom in the late 60s. Until the Great Split of 1969, which directly led to the formation of the Libertarian Party, by the way. Most libertarians worked in YAF, though they struggled valiantly to guide that organization on a more individualistic course. They were generally unsuccessful. The Libertarian faction, which constituted 30 to 40% of the membership, provided YAF with many of its ablest leaders. Penn State YAF, directed by laissez-faire capitalists, was the largest and most active chapter in the country. The traditionalist leadership of YAF was clever enough to use the libertarians, keeping them content with occasional sops, such as the anti-draft program, while at all times maintaining complete control of the organization. Will a united front with conservatives really put us ahead of the game? I think not. When choosing allies for an intellectual battle, one should not pick consistent losers. If nothing else, conservatives have developed an incredible knack for getting trounced. Well, to be fair, so have we now. To be fair. Granted, there are minor victories, the elections of Reagan and Senator Buckley, to name two, but consider the long-term trend. The modern conservative movement can be traced to the founding of National Review in the 1950s. There's no need to recount the tremendous advances of socialism in the past 20 years. Conservatives haven't even slowed the leftist onslaught, much less launched a successful counteroffensive. I'm going to push back here. No fan of conservatives. However, you don't know that they didn't slow socialism because we can't mind the subjunctive. We don't know the counterfactual of how far socialism would have gone if conservatism didn't exist. So that's not a fair point. You can say that they didn't slow it enough. They certainly didn't stop it. But you can't say they didn't slow it at all. We don't know. It's not that they lack the means. Conservatives have the money, manpower, organizations, public relations experts, campaign technicians, and prominent spokesmen. What they lack is a consistent pro-freedom philosophy. It's this and this alone, despite their constant bitching that the cards are stacked against them by the liberal establishment, that has spelled defeat in capital letters for conservatives. To quote one of freedom's more articulate champions, Frederick Bastiat, the worst thing that can happen to a good cause is not to be skillfully attacked, but to be ineptly defended. That's great. You need look no further than the conservative defense of capitalism for the perfect exemplification of this principle. As I mentioned before, conservatives attempt to defend capitalism on every ground: tradition, religion, social order, except reason. Intellectual conservatives scoff at the natural rights theory as the invention of atheistic, materialistic social radicals. They even drag out that old Calvinist bugaboo, original sin, to defend horror of horrors, individual freedom. The argument, a favor of fundamentalist conservatives, is that since we're all evil by nature, no one among us is virtuous enough to be our ruler. Another variant of this argument from depravity is that man isn't good enough, selfless enough for socialism. Due to man's imperfect nature demanding personal rewards for his labor, only capitalism gives him the incentive to help himself and in turn provide mankind with a decent standard of living. Now, if this were the Dark Ages, appeals to mysticism, ancestor worship, and the innate evil of man would be dynamite arguments. But at a time when all values and traditions are being questioned, and more importantly, when the intelligent individual is demanding the rational validation of economic and political theories, conservative exhortations to opt for freedom on irrational grounds receive precisely the amount of attention and interest that they deserve. None. This guy is a fiery writer. He's good. This leads to another drawback in working with conservatives. The right is profoundly anti-intellectual. Young Americans for Freedom is a joke on most college campuses. To an extent, the anti-intellectual stigma has come to conservatives via their left-wing opponents. Nonetheless, conservatives have done much in their right to merit a know-nothing reputation. Conservatives are motivated primarily by fear. Fear of change, fear of new lifestyles, and fear of challenges to traditional values. In this sense, modern conservatives can be seen as the intellectual heirs of 18th and 19th century aristocrats who fought the rise of industrialism in defense of the old order. If you doubt my assertion that conservatives are motivated by fear of change, a brief survey of right-wing rhetoric should remove any misgivings. An anthology of my favorite conservative cliches would have to contain the values that made America great, the faith of our fathers, America, love it or leave it, etc. Woof! Conservatives always seem to speak in terms of Western values, Christian values, traditional American values, anything but rationally derived values. Another excellent illustration of the fear motivation of conservatives is their reaction to the so-called youth culture of the 60s and 70s. And this is going to continue on page 5 in one moment. Birchers are convinced that rock music is a communist. Let's find where this continues. Plot. I refer you to a book entitled Communism, Hypnotism, and the Beatles by one John Noble. I recall seeing literature by the American Independent Party during the 1972 election, which spoke, only half-jokingly, about drowning girls who engage in premarital sex. Long-haired hippie weirdos has to be the favorite conservative cant of the decade. Is it any wonder that Archie Bunker has become the conservative stereotype? Or that conservatives lost almost an entire generation of college students to the politics of the new left? Few intellectuals are inspired by an ideology based on fear, fear of change, fear of new ideas, or fear of foreign hobgoblins. One of the great advantages of libertarianism is that, being based on rational principles, it is open to change. Libertarians can at least tolerate even those lifestyles, such as the hippie communalist, which they might disdain to follow themselves. At the same time, libertarians can look at women's liberation or environmentalism and praise those movements for their positive values while criticizing their irrationalities or coercive tendencies. The libertarian movement is in a unique position. By espousing many ideals of both the left and right, we can appeal to sensitive individuals in both camps, as well as independents who see the flaws in both. But by chaining ourselves to the mortal enemies of the liberals, the laughingstock of the intellectuals, and the favorite whipping boys of the media, we do little to enhance our strategic position. I'm going to change the title of the show, I think, or I'm just going to clip out where I'm going through the article and put this up separately, because I think people need to hear this. There's even people in the party today who love to say, oh no, conservatives are our natural allies. No, they're not. We are our own thing. I often have this fantasy. I'm talking to a young liberal, explaining the relationship between laissez-faire economic theory and the liberal attitude toward personal liberty. I'm gradually persuading him that the only hope for individualism is a society based on voluntarism. He's beginning to understand the immorality of economic coercion, forced charity or welfare, tax theft, public services, and the like. Suddenly, in a puff of smoke with a whiff of brimstone, the old conservative appears. "Greetings," says he. "I'm the libertarian's comrade in arms. I believe in laissez-faire capitalism too. I also want to burn your dirty books, force my personal morality upon you, and send you off to the strange and exotic climes to die for the flag." Woo! With allies like this, we'll be meeting in the phone booth again ere long. All of this is not to say that there aren't some sincere, though misguided, individualists in the conservative camp. I wholeheartedly endorse missionary work on the right. By all means, let us talk to conservatives, sympathize with them when they're in the right, even work with them for specific, very limited, and well-defined purposes. But please, let's not marry them. That is a fantastic article. Didn't agree with everything in it, but overall, 2 thumbs up. I'll drink to that. Well, that's it for this show. Everyone kind of fell silent in chat. Maybe you agreed, maybe you didn't agree. I would love to hear. But until tomorrow, I hope you have an awesome night. I need to get back to packing and doing some work, but it was a pleasure spending this evening with you. Bye-bye.
Given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians, or choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business, not because they want to